Hello! Today's lesson is on adding and subtracting multiple integers. Multiple means more than two. So we learned how to subtract integers yesterday, so we're going to review what we learned. We're going to rewrite the following subtraction expressions into addition expressions using KCC, which means keep, change, or add a line, change the sign. Then we're going to evaluate them, and this means we're going to find the value of each expression. This is very important. Do not change addition expressions. The whole reason we're doing is we want our subtraction to become addition, so if it's already addition, there's no reason to change it. So we're going to start our first expression by doing keep, change. Keep, we change, and we change. We're trying to change that to a plus. So I'm going to keep that -9. I'm going to change the minus to a plus, and then this 2 is right now a positive, so it's going to become negative. So now I need to evaluate it, which means I have to find the value. And you can see that it's now addition. We're going to use our same sign adding rules. So I'm going to add 9 and 2 together to get 11, and I'm going to keep the sign. So the answer is -11. The next problem, I see -11 plus 7. Do you think we should do a keep, change? If you said no, you're correct. We like addition. We're trying to change subtraction to addition. So we can work with this one without doing a keep, change. So I see different signs. I would subtract 11, take away 7. So I'm taking 7 from 11, and I would get 4. And then I'd have to choose the sign of the number that's furthest away from 0. And now I could think about the most counters. So -11 would have most counters or be furthest away from 0. So the answer is -4. Let's try add a line, change the sign on this next one. When we use that, we go immediately to a minus sign. And then we add a line to that minus to make it a plus, and the number behind it becomes its opposite. So I now have 10 plus -18, again, different signs. So 18, take away 10, would be 8. And I can see that this one would have more counters, or it would be furthest from 0. So I'm going to keep the sign or choose the sign of the number furthest from 0. That's also known as the absolute value. This next one I want you to try on your own. You can use KCC or add a line, change a sign. When you're done, start the video again and see if you agree. So I hope you have the same answer for letter D, and now let's move on to the next section. So multiple integers. When we see expressions that have multiple integers and contain addition and subtraction, it may be helpful to change all of the subtraction to addition before we start evaluating. And I'm going to strongly encourage you to do that, because then we're going to have two different ways that we can work with this problem. So this is a situation that I prefer add a line, change the sign, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Right now, every minus sign, I'm just going to go and I'm going to add a line to it. And I'm going to change the sign of the number behind. I get to skip the plus. I see another minus sign. I'm going to add a line, and I'm going to change the sign of the number behind it. So now everything is being added. Here's the reason I prefer that. If we're going to do KCC, I always keep a number until I see a minus sign. That's what makes me change. So I would keep, change. I see a plus sign, so I'm going to keep that. 10 follows the plus sign, so I would keep that. It doesn't follow minus, follows a plus. I see another minus sign, so I'm going to change. And then since I changed the minus sign, I have to change the number behind it. So keep, change gets a little bit weird looking and kind of uncomfortable. So that's why I prefer to just go directly to add a line to all minuses, change the sign of the number behind it. Add a line to all the minuses, change the sign of the number behind it. I think it makes it a little bit easier for me to work with. But you are doing the math, so you can decide what works best for you. So it says once that's accomplished, meaning we all have all addition in this expression, we can choose how to find the answer. And one way is to use the commutative property. The commutative property says that if you're adding or multiplying, and everything is being added or multiplied, either all adding, all multiplying, we can move numbers around. The root of this word is commute, which means to move. And what would be the advantage of that is we can gather up same sign numbers, which are much easier to add because we just add and keep the sign. So if I look at this expression, I'm going to gather up the -4, and I'm going to look for another negative, and as luck would have it, -7 is right next to it. I don't see any more negatives, so now I'm going to go and look for my positives and gather up my positives. Well, I see a +10, and I see a +9. So now I have two groups, one all negative, one all positive. So now I'm going to add those numbers because it's easier to add same sign because you add them and keep the sign. So that's my group of negatives. They became -11. And this group of positives, I add them and I keep the sign, which is positive. So now I have to use my different sign rule, which says I take the number furthest from 0, highest absolute value, minus the lowest number, and I'm going to have 8, and then I have to decide what sign I should use. Well, there's most value in the 19. It's furthest from 0, so the answer is 8. So now there's another way to do this, and it's called the order of operations. So order of operations, you may have learned it in the past, I'm not sure if they were able to get to it last year, is also known as PEMDAS. And there's a silly little saying that goes, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which is meant to help us remember this. And so what the P stands for is grouping symbols like parentheses, and then an exponent, anything that has a little exponent on it. Multiplication would be multiplying, D would be dividing, A would be adding, and S would be subtracting. So we have all the operations covered. Now, if you look at this, adding and subtracting come at the end, and so we don't have to do any of the other things. We just need to add and subtract. In fact, we're going to focus on adding, and we do it in the order that the numbers, the way we see the numbers. So I'm just going to copy down what I see above. This is what we've changed it to. So everything's adding. So I'm just going to go ahead and write this as is. So this is what this looks like. I'm just going to take these numbers two at a time, and this -4 plus -7 is -11, and I'm going to drop down the rest of the numbers I didn't use. Now I'm going to start that second line again, and I'm going to take -11 plus 10. They're different signs, so I subtract. I get -1, and then I'm going to drop down the number I didn't use. And I'm going to do one last time. I'm going to put -1 plus 9, and that gives me +8. And then I'm done. So both times, if you notice, we had the same answer. So you get to use whichever one you prefer. We're going to do one more together, and then I'm going to have you try one on your own. So let's look over this expression. I'm going to use add a line, change a sign. That's just my preferred way when there's many integers to deal with. And I'm going to start looking at all the minuses. The minute I see a minus, I'm going to add a line, and I'm going to change the sign. So I'm going to add a line, change the sign behind it. Add a line, change the sign behind it. Add a line, change the sign behind it. If you would prefer KCC, I'll show you what that looks like. In this case, I would keep the -5. I see a minus, so I would change it and the number behind it. I see another minus, so I change it and the number behind it. I see another minus, I change it and the number behind it. We would ultimately still end up with the same thing I did when I had add a line, change a sign. We have -5 plus -2 plus +8 plus -11. So now that we have this expression, if I want to use, or if you want to use the commutative property, I get to gather up all my positives and all my negatives. It doesn't matter what you start with. So I'm going to choose to gather up all of my negative numbers. So I'm going to gather up -5, and then I'm going to gather -2, and then I see one more negative number, -11. Then I'm going to gather up my positive numbers, and I just see one positive number, +8. So now I'm going to try to add these up. As I look at these, they're all negative. So I know my answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to put my negative sign down because I know the answer is negative. 5 plus 2 is 7, and 7 plus 11 is -18. Now, I only have one positive number, so I don't have to do any math there. I just drop it down. Now I have my negatives all gathered up, my positives all gathered up, and because they're different signs, I have to subtract. 18 take away 8 is 10, and I look for the number that has the most counters or the highest absolute value, otherwise furthest from 0, and that's -18. So my answer is -10. So let's see what the same problem looks like if we do it order of operations. So I'm going to write the problem exactly as I see it after I've changed it. And I'm going to then do two numbers at a time. Order of operations says start from left to right. And since everything's adding, I'm just going to keep moving left to right, left to right, left to right. -5 plus -2 is -7. I'm going to drop down the numbers I didn't use. So I didn't use this +8, and I didn't use this plus -11. Now I'm going to gather up numbers again, starting from left to right. I'm going to gather these up. Whoops, pressed the wrong one. And when I gather those up, I see different signs, and I'm going to take away 7 from 8 because they're different signs. So I'm going to get 1, and it's a +1. So now I have to drop down the number I didn't use, which is plus -11. And finally, I'm going to go from left to right, circle two numbers at a time, 1 plus -11, different signs, so I subtract and get 10. And then negatives, there's more negative values, so I'm going to write negative. So both times we came up with the same answer. Would you please try, first of all, would you stop the video, try to use keep, change, or add a line, change the sign in the following expression. Then look to see if we both agree on it, and then you can choose to evaluate it by using the commutative property or order of operations, whatever you prefer. Hopefully we're starting with this same expression. Everything is now addition, and now choose the version that you prefer. Okay, would you please look over what you've done and make corrections if needed? And then I'd like you to go to the matching homework page that's attached and try whatever method you prefer. There's 4 problems, and I'd like you to try those. Thank you.